A poor black farmer risked his life to drag a stranger out of a burning car, but when he turned around, his entire cornfield, his only way to pay off his debts and send his daughter to college, had already gone up in flames. Even in the midst of panic and heartbreak, he still brought the injured stranger home, bandaged him up and let him stay the night, leaving the whole neighborhood stunned. But the very next day, trouble hit hard. The bank showed up to seize his farm, and the stranger had completely disappeared. Just when he thought his life was over, 10 black SUVs suddenly came speeding down his dirt road, leaving him frozen in shock. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from. Subscribe and hype, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The morning sun was already brutal by 10 o'clock, turning the Kansas dirt into something close to concrete and making the air above Marcus Hill's cornfield shimmer like water. He was kneeling beside the irrigation pump at the eastern edge of his property, wrench in hand, trying to coax a few more months of life out of equipment that should have been replaced 2 years ago. The pump coughed and sputtered, leaking water from a crack in the housing that Marcus had patched 3 times already. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand and muttered a curse under his breath. A new pump would cost close to $2,000, money he absolutely did not have, not with Alicia's acceptance letter to Columbia University sitting on the kitchen table like a beautiful, impossible dream. Marcus was 41 years old, a black man with shoulders still broad from decades of farm work and hands so calloused they barely felt the heat of the metal wrench anymore. His wife Sarah had been gone for 3 years now, taken by cancer that had burned through their savings faster than it burned through her body, and he'd been raising their daughter alone ever since, trying to keep the 20-hectare corn farm profitable enough to cover the basics: food, electricity, the mortgage payment to Frank Doyle's bank that hung over everything like a storm cloud that never quite broke. The corn was good this year though. Marcus straightened up and looked out over the field, rows of green stalks standing tall and healthy in the merciless sun. If the weather held, if prices stayed steady, if nothing catastrophic happened, this harvest would be enough. Just barely enough to make the mortgage payment, cover Alicia's first semester tuition, and maybe, if he was very careful, put a little aside for emergencies. It was a lot of ifs. He was tightening the last bolt on the pump housing when he heard it. The high-pitched scream of tires losing traction, the mechanical shriek of brakes that weren't catching, and then a sound like the world splitting open. Marcus dropped his wrench and ran. He sprinted through the corn rows, his boots pounding the hard earth, his heart already hammering because he just knew that whatever had happened was bad. The sound had come from the access road that bordered the southern edge of his property, where the black top curved sharply, and drivers unfamiliar with the area often took the turn too fast. When he broke through the last row of corn, his stomach dropped. A red sports car, sleek and expensive looking, had left the road entirely and plowed straight into his field. It had cut a destructive path through at least 30 yards of corn before the front end crumpled against the harder packed earth. The hood was buckled upward, steam hissing from the ruined engine, and as Marcus watched in horror, he saw the first flicker of flame underneath the chassis. Inside the car, visible through the spider-webbed windshield, was a man slumped over the steering wheel. Blood ran down the side of his face from a gash near his temple. Marcus didn't hesitate. He didn't think about the corn getting crushed, or the lawsuit that might follow, or any of the 100 practical concerns that would have been reasonable to consider. He just ran toward the burning car. The driver's side door was jammed. Marcus yanked on it twice before giving up and looking around wildly for something, anything. He spotted a rock the size of his fist half buried in the dirt, grabbed it, and slammed it into the driver's side window. The glass shattered on the second hit, and Marcus reached through, ignoring the cuts opening on his forearm, fumbling for the door release. The door groaned open. The man inside was young, maybe 30, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt, breathing but unconscious. Marcus unclicked the seatbelt and hauled the man out, draping him over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. The man was heavier than he looked, dead weight, and Marcus's legs burned as he stumbled backward, away from the car. He made it maybe 20 yards before the gas tank exploded. The blast wave hit Marcus from behind, hot and violent, and he threw himself forward over the unconscious man, shielding him with his own body as burning debris rained down around them. A piece of flaming metal landed in the corn 3 feet away, and within seconds the dry stalks caught fire. Marcus watched, his heart sinking into his boots, as flames raced through his field. The corn was tinder dry from weeks of heat, and the fire spread with terrifying speed, jumping from row to row, consuming everything. He could already see that he was going to lose at least a third of the field, maybe more, and with it any hope of making the mortgage payment, or sending Alicia to college in the fall. But the man on the ground beside him was breathing. That was something. Marcus felt his chest tighten, felt something that might have been tears or might have been just sweat burning in his eyes, and he made himself look away from the burning field. He bent down, hoisted the stranger onto his shoulders again, and started walking toward the house. Behind him, everything he'd worked for turned to ash and smoke, but his hands stayed steady and his steps stayed sure, because saving a life, he told himself, saving a life was more important than corn. It had to be. By the time Marcus got the stranger back to the house and laid him on the living room couch, the man was starting to stir. Marcus called the local doctor, old Dr. Patterson, who'd delivered Alicia 17 years ago, and the doctor arrived 20 minutes later in his pickup truck, black bag in hand. Patterson examined the stranger carefully, checking his pupils, testing his reflexes, cleaning and bandaging the head wound. "Concussion," he said finally. "Probably moderate. He needs to stay still for at least 3 days longer if symptoms persist. Watch for vomiting, confusion, severe headache. If any of that happens, you call me immediately, and we'll get him to the hospital in Wichita." "He can stay here," Marcus heard himself say. Patterson looked at him over his glasses. "You sure about that, Marcus? You don't know this man." "I pulled him out of a burning car. Can't very well leave him in a ditch now." The doctor nodded slowly. "All right, I'll check on him tomorrow. And Marcus, that was a good thing you did. A brave thing." After Patterson left, Marcus sat in the kitchen and let himself feel it, the full weight of what had just happened, what he'd just lost. Alicia was at the library in town, studying for her SATs, even though she'd already been accepted to Columbia, because that's who she was. She didn't know yet. He'd have to tell her when she got home that their plans, their careful calculations, had just gone up in smoke. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the kitchen table, an old wooden thing with water stains and knife marks, and made himself breathe. The man on the couch groaned softly. Marcus stood and walked back to the living room. The stranger's eyes were open now, confused and unfocused. He blinked several times, trying to orient himself, his hand moving instinctively toward the bandage on his head. "Easy," Marcus said, his voice gentle. "You were in a car accident. You hit your head pretty good. Doctor says you need to rest." The man stared at him. "What happened?" "Your car went off the road, crashed into my cornfield. I pulled you out before it exploded." Understanding dawned slowly in the man's eyes, followed immediately by horror. "Your field? Oh God, did I?" "It caught fire," Marcus said simply. "Burned about a third of it, before we could get it under control. But you're alive, and that's what matters." The stranger looked like he might be sick. "I am so sorry. I don't even remember what happened. The road just turned and I couldn't." He stopped, pressing the heels of his palms against his eyes. "I'll pay for the damages, whatever it costs, insurance, or out of pocket, whatever you need. Let's worry about that later. Right now, you need to rest. What's your name?" "Marcus Hill." "And you are?" The man hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Nathan Cole." Marcus nodded and went to get Nathan some water and something for the pain. When he came back, Nathan was staring at the ceiling, his face pale and drawn. "The doctor says you should stay here for a few days," Marcus said, handing him the water and pills. "Make sure that concussion doesn't get worse. Guest room's just down the hall. I can't impose, you already crashed into my field. Might as well stay and make sure you don't die on my couch. Would be terrible paperwork." Nathan managed a weak smile. He took the pills and drank the water slowly, then lay back against the cushions. Within minutes he was asleep. Marcus stood looking down at him for a long moment. The stranger was young, probably not even 35, with the kind of clean-shaven, well-groomed appearance that suggested money. The jeans were expensive despite being casual, and the watch on his wrist, even scratched from the crash, looked like it cost more than Marcus made in a year. Rich kid, probably. Someone's son out for a drive through the countryside, not paying attention, not understanding that a moment of carelessness could destroy someone's entire livelihood. Marcus felt a flash of anger, hot and bitter, but he pushed it down. The man hadn't meant to crash. It was an accident, and Marcus had made his choice when he ran toward that burning car instead of trying to save his crops. He'd just have to live with the consequences. Nathan Cole woke the next morning with a headache that felt like someone had driven a spike through his skull. For a moment he couldn't remember where he was or how he'd gotten there, and then it all came rushing back. The curve in the road appearing too fast, the steering wheel jerking uselessly in his hands, the sickening crunch of impact. And then nothing until waking up on a stranger's couch with a bandaged head and the knowledge that he'd destroyed someone's livelihood. He sat up slowly, testing his balance. The room tilted slightly but steadied. He was in a small living room with worn furniture that looked like it had been collected over decades from yard sales and hand-me-downs. Everything was old but clean, maintained with obvious care despite limited resources. The walls showed water stains in the corners, and the floorboards creaked when he stood, but there was something warm about the space that Nathan's expensive penthouse in Chicago had never managed to achieve. On the mantel above a small fireplace sat a framed photograph. Marcus, looking younger and less worn, standing beside a beautiful black woman with kind eyes, both of them with their arms around a little girl with bright ribbons in her hair. The woman in the photo was gone now. Nathan could tell from the way the photo sat alone, from the faint layer of dust that suggested it wasn't moved or cleaned as often as things that were still part of daily life. Nathan walked slowly to the kitchen, following the smell of coffee. Marcus was at the stove, scrambling eggs in a cast-iron pan, and he glanced over when Nathan appeared in the doorway. "Morning. How's the head?" "Hurts, but I'll live, thanks to you." Marcus just nodded and gestured to the table. "Sit. Doctor said you need to eat." Nathan sat at the small kitchen table, and Marcus set a plate in front of him. Eggs, toast, a slice of tomato, simple food, but prepared with care. Nathan ate slowly, partly because his stomach was still unsettled from the concussion, and partly because he was trying to figure out what to say, how to begin apologizing for the damage he'd caused. Before he could speak, the front door opened and a young woman walked in, carrying a backpack and a stack of library books. She was 17 or 18, tall and pretty with her father's eyes and her mother's smile, and she stopped short when she saw Nathan at the kitchen table. "Dad, who's this?" "This is Nathan Cole," Marcus said. "He's the one who crashed into the south field yesterday. He's going to be staying with us for a few days while he recovers." "Nathan, this is my daughter Alicia." "Hi," Alicia said cautiously, setting her books on the counter. Then processing what her father had said, "Wait, the crash. How bad is the field?" Marcus's expression didn't change, but Nathan saw something flicker in his eyes. "About a third of it burned. Maybe a little more." Alicia's face went pale. She looked at her father, then at Nathan, then back at her father. "Dad, we'll figure it out," Marcus said firmly, the kind of tone that meant the conversation was over. But Nathan had seen the look that passed between them, had seen Alicia's stricken expression before she got it under control, and he understood immediately that the damage he'd caused wasn't just to crops, it was to plans, to futures, to careful calculations that didn't have room for error. Over the next 3 days, as Nathan recovered under Dr. Patterson's cautious supervision, he observed the Hill household with growing fascination and something that felt uncomfortably like envy. They were poor, that was obvious from the patched furniture and the careful way they managed every resource. But they had something Nathan hadn't experienced since he was very young, maybe not even then. They had warmth. Marcus and Alicia moved around each other.